We have discussed quite, especially the first basically 40 minutes of this show. The ACC Media Days began. We had some quotes from Jim Phillips. We discussed Florida State, Clemson, and much, much more. David Teel, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, who's been our guy and go-to when it comes to a lot of things ACC, joins us on 365 Sports with Paul Craig, and I'm David Smoke. David, thanks for your time. How did you think Jim Phillips performed today?
Quite well. He was as assertive and substantive, guys, as I have ever heard him. And frankly, that's exactly what he needed to be. The people who care about this league and want to see it thrive for the long term needed to see him fight. And I thought he fought today.
David, there's things that he cannot control. He can't control what's going on in the courts, and I'm sure he has no idea about what other schools might feel similar to Florida State and Clemson or feel that they have options like that. But do you see a way forward where they could lose 2 to 4 schools max and then keep it together and maybe add, 4 schools to get them back to where they are?
It depends on what schools they were. Florida State and Clemson would probably be 2, but if you talk about North Carolina being in that group, then things get a little dicey for the viability of the league. You might be looking at a reformation in a much smaller conglomeration. There are so many possibilities that anyone who tells you that they know how this might play out, I think is fibbing to you.
David, did that translate over to the ACC media floor? Like, just in terms of talking to your fellow reporters and just seeing the coaches and play, like, what was sort of the vibe? Did it have a different feel to it because there's all of this uncertainty, or was it sort of business as usual? How would you describe it?
Well, it is a different vibe for several reasons. Yes, the uncertainty, but also the newcomers.
Right.
Now, we didn't hear from Cal and Stanford today, but we did hear from SMU and Rhett Lashley and 3 of his players. And guys, the Mustangs are here to win and win immediately. Within a calendar year of the announcement that SMU was joining the ACC, the school athletics raised $159 million. That's an unprecedented haul in one calendar year nationally. No one raises that kind of money. But when you have oil barons among your alumni and boosters, and they get jazzed about moving up into a power conference for the first time since the old Southwest Conference's demise, you're going to get that kind of money.
Yeah, they've made their entrance very clear and have done it emphatically. We've had their AD, Rick Hart. We've also had Rhett Lashley on. I think tomorrow we're going to have one of their football players on the show too. David, with FSU being the loudest in the room, and Clemson's kind of been a part of at least saying, hey, we're a little bit unhappy too. How would you describe Florida State among how everybody else in the ACC looks at them?
I think they're a little exhausted with Florida State because this isn't the first time that Florida State has voiced its displeasure. This is the loudest and perhaps the most dangerous isn't the right word, but just threatening to the league's future. And do Florida State and FSU want more money? Yes. Is the ACC working with them in an attempt to bridge that much discussed revenue gap? Absolutely. As Jim Phillips revealed today, if you go win the national championship in football, you can earn up to $25 million beyond your standard distribution. You can, moreover, with the expansion, the ACC expects to generate another $600 million over the course of the ESPN contract. That's another $50 million plus a year for the league. So it's not like the conference is standing still. And when you hear some of those numbers, you wonder, why are they so emphatic? Why are they so insistent that they want to leave? I think Clemson is a totally different case. I think the tenor is different. I think the intent is different. But we'll see.
How much of Florida State's situation is fueled by the playoff snub and maybe making them act a little bit more irrationally than they would otherwise, speaking and knowing how that university works quite well as an alum?
A lot. I'm not sure, guys. Was it always going to come to a lawsuit? Maybe. But there is no question that December 22nd happened, the day they filed the lawsuit, happened a lot faster because of that playoff snub. They were livid. And by the way, I do not blame them. They should have made the playoff, but I do not blame the ACC. I do not blame Jim Phillips. I blame the selection committee. They're the ones that made the decision.
David, he had a pretty strong statement on ESPN. As you know, there's so much conversation about the future and what all that looks like, but said our partnership with ESPN isn't going away. You had that tweet out there. Was that something you expected him to address, and was it as, you think, satisfactory of an answer as he could have given the circumstances? Just how did you sort of view the ESPN comment he made?
I thought it was as direct as he could have been. He was asked specifically about, the opt-out clause that ESPN has in 2027 to exit the deal, which does extend till 2036. And that was his response. It is not going away. And, he's in the room with Jimmy Pitaro and the other ESPN suits. We'll see if he reads that room correctly.
Do you believe that if, in fact, Florida State and Clemson were to become free agents, that neither the Big Ten or the SEC would want them?
I don't know that. I don't believe they are extremely interested at this point, just because they're trying to navigate their own expansions, Texas and Oklahoma, USC and Washington and Oregon and UCLA. But my sense is those leagues are content, and Florida State and Clemson especially don't bring much market-wise to the SEC. Would they to the Big Ten? Yes. But then it becomes awfully unwieldy. At least 20 schools, they go even more. I just have serious doubts about them landing in either of those two conferences. But you never say never in real life.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
There's always that.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons our show grew from what it was to where it is now, because constant churning of speculation, and so much of it became true.
Well, guys, a year ago, who would have dreamt that Stanford and Cal would be members of the Atlantic Coast Conference?
Right, yeah. Crazy. Florida State was there today. Was there anything on their end that, because I didn't really read much about them. I read a lot of Jim Phillips, and, obviously there's the localized reports as well, SMU. But was there really much from the Florida State perspective outside of just their players kind of going through the regular media day motions?
Full disclosure, guys, because of the interview schedules and my schedule and when I was writing and such, I did not listen to the Florida State interview.
Okay.
I apologize.
No, yeah. I mean, we were at Media Days just a couple weeks ago, and I know how that can go. But, yeah, I was just curious, especially given the highlighted comments today and the fact that they were also there on day number one. David, just from your perspective, what's the most exciting thing about the ACC that you think people will be talking about on the field this year?
I think the arrival of SMU is one of them, but I think the primary storyline is, can the league get multiple teams into the playoff, and is Florida State ready to offer, another type of season like it did a year ago?
It's just amazing where it is. Thank you, David. Great stuff. To get you on the first day of ACC Media Days is great. Appreciate your feedback and insight and knowledge. Thank you.
My pleasure, guys.
Thank
Thanks for having me.
David Teel, the Richmond Times-Dispatch from ACC Media Days.
And his podcast